Good morning, everyone. My name is Brandon, and thank you for attending the AirWatch webinar. I do see we have some people that are watching right now, so if you could just kindly introduce yourself in the chat over on the right-hand side, state your name and the school you're at, and then we'll begin momentarily while we wait for some people to come in. So, thank you. Hello, Angela. Welcome. Welcome. I'm just going to get started around. I'm going to give people a few more minutes just to come in and introduce themselves. I saw 8 people waiting while we were here, so I'm just going to see if they all respond. Hello, Jennifer from Rockford Public School. Welcome. All right, just to be cognizant of your time, I'm going to begin, and as people join in, I'm hoping that they will see all the chatter in the chat and then introduce themselves, and then we'll carry on. Hello, Sandra Neal from St. Andrew Public School. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. You have attended the AirWatch webinar, and we are going to go over AirWatch, which is our new mobile device management product, which we use to manage our iPads for now. And it will be extended to other mobile devices, including Android devices. And more recently, we found out that they will be extending it to some new cell phones as we replace the BlackBerry. So that'll be an interesting development. But for now, we're going to focus on the iPads and how we'll be using AirWatch to manage your iPads in your school. Oops. So now, before we begin, I just want to go over some things. One thing is that the webinar is actually being recorded, and it will be available at the end of the webinar using the same YouTube link that you're using right now. So if you missed something, or maybe you came in late and you want to come back and watch something again, every webinar that we have is recorded. Why do we keep recording them? Well, AirWatch keeps changing. So, for example, there's been a recent cosmetic change that sort of nullified all our previous documentation. So it's a good thing that we keep doing these things because it does keep up to date with the fact that the AirWatch environment does change cosmetically. They add new features sometimes. So it is good to watch the latest and greatest webinar. And thank you for attending. So yes, at the end of this webinar, you will see that this same link that you have, we'll be able to go back and watch it again. Another thing is that there is about a 10-second delay between the time that I say something into the microphone and by the time that you guys actually hear it on your end. So if you're asking a question in the chat and you're wondering why I'm not responding right away, it might just be that I haven't seen it yet, so bear with me here. Also, do feel free to ask questions in the chat. Aside from me addressing some of the questions verbally, I also have an assistant here, Felipe, who is watching the chat and will be answering sort of like the quick questions that you guys jot forward. So he'll be quick to respond to those. And anything that requires a little bit more detail can be taken back to the end. There's a Q&A period where he will pull those questions aside that require more detail, and then we'll go over those at the end. And also, we're also going to go over the quality before we begin. So if you're noticing that the quality might be a little bit low, or maybe it's not quite clear, or the font isn't quite readable, you can adjust the quality settings in the bottom right-hand corner by hovering your mouse over the YouTube video, clicking the little gear icon, And you'll see there's a little quality tab there where you can click that and expand it to something higher, to like 1080p or 720p. That'll be clear, but it'll also be a little bit slower. Hi, Aaron. Sorry. But yeah, you can adjust the quality on the YouTube video so that it's either quicker or higher quality. I guess this is a good time to ask, how is the quality on your end right now? Is it stuttering? Is the volume wrong? If you see something technical and you want to let me know, that'd be great in the chat so that I can just make sure that I have everything set up here correctly. Also, next to the volume control is a little live button, and if you see that live button is showing that there's a gray circle next to the live icon, it just means that it's fallen a little bit out of sync. So if you actually press the wording live, it'll take you to the most recent copy, or I guess the livest possible version of the webinar. So just something to keep in mind as you go along, if maybe if you don't see something. So some prerequisites. We're hoping that by the time you guys have received the invitation for this webinar, that you all have AirWatch access granted by your principal through LAS. So part of this AirWatch deployment procedure that we have is we reach out to the schools, we let them know what AirWatch is, and then we speak with your principal. We try to guide them through adding some users at the school, some of you guys, hi Rebecca, guiding you guys into having AirWatch access. So we do that through LAS. Now, sometimes the principal, we weren't able to get a hold of them, so we sent them the instructions, and we're hoping that has been done so that you guys can actually log in to the AirWatch console. We're also hoping that you guys probably at least have one device enrolled in AirWatch. If you had field services come out and set up your school, you probably already have all your devices enrolled in AirWatch, or at least a large majority. If you're doing a self-enrollment where you only have, let's say, 20 or so iPads and you just had to wipe them and enroll them, we're hoping you have at least one in here so that you can play around with it and get the feel with it. So there is no pressure to have all your iPads enrolled right now. I mean, you can sort of have one at a time just to play around with it as you get more familiar with it. But yeah, the idea is that we're hoping that at least you have one device that you can see in your environment so that when you pull up the AirWatch environment, you'll see that. There are some links in the video description to our ServiceIT website. We also got a link to the app request form, and what else do we have in this video description? Which is a whole bunch of stuff. So you can go back and check those later. Those links are in the video description, and they will be available also at the end of the webinar. Just if you ever want to click to see where we're referencing when we're talking about some of the support documentation. So the objectives for today is we intend to familiarize you guys, or the schools, with AirWatch and managing iPads. So how it is that you will be using AirWatch to manage your iPads. We're going to highlight the key benefits, explain to you why it is that AirWatch is really beneficial for your schools, and how it is that you can simplify once you've gotten the ball rolling managing your devices. We're also going to demonstrate how you will be using AirWatch in your school, like a real-world scenario. Sorry, I'm just looking at the chat here. We only have one of us with right now. Okay, one is just fine. How do we enroll the device that we have? So enrollment, Rebecca, is basically you just wipe the device. So once you've wiped a device, it automatically forces it to enroll when it comes back to life, basically. There is a step. You know what? I'll quickly show it later on in the webinar, but we wanted to avoid the enrollment process during this webinar just because there's a lot of stuff to cover, and we're trying to squeeze it all within an hour. So, but I will pull up a little bit of a documentation just to show you what enrollment exactly is and how it is that you go about doing that. It says, am I supposed to be seeing something other than the chat? Sandra, yeah, there's supposed to be a video over to the left-hand side. I'm not sure what's going on your screen, but it should be chat's on the right-hand side and the video is on the left. You may have accidentally expanded the chat, and maybe it's popped out and you have it on full screen. So hopefully you can figure that out. But moving right along, AirWatch. What is AirWatch? I have a YouTube channel up, but it has not started yet. Keep saying live in 65 seconds. Can you refresh that screen? Press F5 on your keyboard when you're on that YouTube link. So let me just see if I'm going to pull this real quick. So here's what I'm watching right now. This is you guys. This is the video. This is what you're supposed to see. I mean, you probably don't see it because you don't see the video. But if you take the link up here, you can refresh the page by pressing F5 or clicking this little refresh icon. Right now it's an X, but it'll look like a little recycle logo like that, and that will refresh the page on your browser. So So AirWatch, what is it? Well, AirWatch is a mobile device management system, or we have in brackets here MDM, or Enterprise Mobility Management System. The two terms are interchangeable, so if you hear me say MDM on one end and EMM on the other, don't worry about it. Volume is extremely low, and I've put it as high as it goes. Can everyone else hear me okay? I imagine everyone can hear me okay. Hello, Ashley. So AirWatch is a mobile device management system / enterprise mobility management system. And like I said, the two terms are interchangeable. So if you hear me say it one time and then EMM on the other, do not worry about it. It basically means that they're both referring to the same idea, which is a centralized portal for configuring and managing mobile devices. Thanks, guys. So it's just probably some volume controls on their end. I wish I could. Funny enough, we are the client service desk, so I'd be more than willing to help you out. But unfortunately, I got to do this. So hopefully you can figure that out. But AirWatch is a centralized place, basically. All our iPads speak to AirWatch, and all commands come out from AirWatch. So they all talk to AirWatch, and AirWatch tells the iPads what to do, what apps to have, how to look, how to behave. Oops. So what are the benefits of AirWatch? Why did we get AirWatch? Why? One of the key benefits is automatic TDSB wireless network access. And it says here WLAN TDSB 01. So basically, prior to AirWatch, what we had to have happen is you would have to join TDSB-Wi-Fi, or even more formally, you would have to have it on TDSB staff is what it used to be called. And basically, when you wanted the iPad to join the wireless network, you had to type in your employee number and password, and then there were concerns, well, if someone's on an iPad and with my employee number and password on the Wi-Fi, am I held liable for everything they do on the network? So right now, all the iPads are connected to WLAN TDSB 01 when they're in AirWatch. There is no need to use your employee number or password. That way, let's say your username or password expires, you don't have to rejoin the wireless network. It sticks to WLAN TDSB 01. It has a certificate on there to join that particular wireless network, and it should be pretty seamless. There's also easy app installation for multiple iPads. So as opposed to, going up, picking up each iPad and downloading the apps, we push it out from AirWatch. So it's all done wirelessly, so remote wireless configuration updates. So we can configure the iPad over Wi-Fi. We don't have to plug it into a computer or plug it into iTunes. Same goes with updates. You can actually push out updates from AirWatch, so you can update all your iPads. It also removes the requirement for an Apple ID. So prior to AirWatch, we basically, and the process was you had to go on each iPad, sign in with your Apple ID that we gave the school. So every school has an Apple ID that's, number dash mobile G at tdsb.on.ca. And that, was a pretty big step, especially if one person forgets the Apple ID password and they change it, and then the next person doesn't know about that the password has been changed. It was causing a lot of calls to come in where people were basically resetting the Apple IDs back and forth. And on top of that, you got to sign into each iPad and download apps from each iPad. And that's fine if you have maybe 5, but there, a lot of schools, they have 60 plus, and that becomes very cumbersome when you want to push one app to all your iPads. There's also a consistent experience between iPads based on your configuration. So you could, for example, have a set of apps that go to one grade and a set of apps that go to another grade, and then so on and so forth. So that way, you can pick up one app and pick up one iPad, and it will have the apps that you want for that iPad, or the apps that you've configured for it. So they're consistent based on how you guys decide to configure them. There's also some built-in security policies that will prevent students from adding or removing apps, applying a passcode to the device, and then effectively locking out that device. So this is one of the more frequent calls we were getting prior to AirWatch. And basically what it was is that because the iPads were basically, students could do whatever they wanted to them. They had as much access as the teacher who picks it up. So what they would do is they would go into the settings, they would go to the passcode, and then they would put a passcode on the device and not tell the teacher what the passcode was. So, you pick up the iPad and you want to use it, and all of a sudden it's asking you for a passcode. And, if you guessed it wrong, it would lock out the iPad. So I'm going to show you a little bit more in detail about what I'm referring to when it comes to that. But that is one of the features of AirWatch. That, there's sort of a deviation between, this is in teacher mode and this is in student mode. And lastly, another benefit is it gives you a kind of an overview of the inventory of your iPads. You can track all of them. You know what model they are, what the serial numbers are, what the status is of them. And so it's a good place to go and take a look at all your iPads. So who can log into AirWatch? Well, by default, all principals can log into AirWatch. And as an extension of that, principals can add users at the school to AirWatch so that they can log in. And how that's done is through LAS, which is available on your school folder on your desktop. Basically, your principal logs into LAS and he adds you to the EMM group. And then you will have AirWatch access 12 to 24 hours later. So basically, principals by default have access, and then principals then add users at the school to have access to manage AirWatch, which is what we were hoping to have done for all the people who've attended this webinar. So hopefully all of you have access at this point, but that cannot be guaranteed because some principals we couldn't get a hold of, unfortunately. So this demo will cover the iPad's new look and feel, so what that's going to look like, and I'll show you that very shortly. We're going to go over navigating the AirWatch console, how to use it. And we're going to show you how to organize your iPads into smart groups. So this is sort of that grouping that I was talking about. You could have, let's say, 10 iPads in grade 1 and 10 iPads in grade 2. And then you can have, apps just for the grade 1s and apps just for the grade 2. So we group our iPads, and then we apply apps to the groups. And that'll make more sense as we go along. And then, of course, obviously, after grouping the iPads, we will be adding and removing apps to those groups. And we'll also be adding and removing web clips. And a web clip is basically just like a browser shortcut. It's just a hyperlink to a website, which you'll see later too as well. So before we carry on, I'm going to show you the device side of things. I did talk a lot about that separation between student mode and teacher mode, and I think that was pretty important to talk about, which is why we included in this webinar. So I'm actually going to pull up my iPad on the screen here using some software that virtualizes it. So you can see here that I have an iPad. So this is what an AirWatch iPad looks like. Some first things that we can see, actually let me just lock the screen here so you can see the beautiful TDSB logo. So this is the lock screen. It's got our Toronto District School Board logo on there, so a very consistent experience between all of them. All of them will have the Toronto District School Board logo in the background. And then once you open up the iPad, they all have the same blue background. What the two important AirWatch components, two important AirWatch components on the iPad, I'm trying to move this guy over so I can put them side by side, there we go, are the agent app right here. So this is the agent app. This is the brains behind AirWatch. This is what communicates to AirWatch and tells it what to do. And then there is the catalog, which I won't open now because there isn't anything in there. But a catalog, I'll explain more in detail later. Essentially, if I wanted to put some apps in there and give people who are using the iPad the option to install an app as opposed to forcing it to the iPad, they would all go in the catalog. But for now, we're going to focus on the agent. So I'm just going to pause here because I see questions. Some of us have lost the TDSB background logo. I'm wondering if students have done that. I can't get it back on those iPads. So the TDSB background logo actually doesn't appear in the background of the iPad, only on the lock screen. So for example, I push the lock button, and now I can see the Toronto District School Board logo here. And then once I unlock it, you'll see that the background is just jet blue. Now, if the background has changed since then, I have a good feeling that that iPad is probably not enrolled in AirWatch because, and this is actually a good segue into it, AirWatch does have basically two modes, student mode and we'll call it teacher mode. And I just use those, I just created those terms up. Those aren't the actual terms for it. But basically, right now, the iPad is in a current lockdown state, and I'll show you what I mean. So these are the only two pages I can flip through. And you'll notice on neither of these do I have the App Store. And that was sort of by design. So right now, what it is in student mode. And basically, I can't, as a student, pick up this iPad and install whatever app I want. And if I go into settings, I also cannot add a passcode. So there's some settings here that are usually here that I don't see, and I'm going to switch over to teacher mode shortly and show you that those settings are no longer, those settings will come back. But basically on the left-hand side, you would normally see the option to set a passcode on the device so that when I pick it up and unlock it, I got to type in a 4-digit number, a 6-digit number, or whatever I set. Right now I can't do that, and this was sort of to prevent students from doing that. And also, you said that that students were changing the background. So if the device is properly enrolled, they do not have the option to change the background. So right now, there's another setting that's supposed to be here on the left-hand side that would give me the ability to change the background, and I don't have that feature right now in student mode. So based on what you're describing, Angela, it probably sounds like it's not enrolled properly. So it may, and hopefully, if you stick around till the end of this when there's a Q&A period, I'll quickly touch on the enrollment properly part. But basically, right now you'll know a device is enrolled when you see the agent app. The agent app is your first sign that it can that it's enrolled in AirWatch. That agent app right here is, like I said, the brains behind the whole matter. So speaking of the agent app, I've shown you now that this thing is pretty locked down. I can't put any passcodes. I can't install any apps. So as a student, it's pretty much tamper-proof. So if I click the agent app, what I can do is I can actually sign into the agent app. So this is another behavior that you should notice on your iPads. Is if you tap the agent app, eventually once it finishes loading, it will come up and it will give me the option to sign in with the username and password like I see here. Any TDSB staff member can type in their username and password here. And if you type in your username and password here, it effectively unlocks the iPad and puts it in a non-limited state, or we'll call it teacher mode as of state. So just to demonstrate, I'm going to type in my employee number here. I am not going to type my password because the keys show as I type, so I'm just going to quickly switch back. And of course, I have a really long password. Bear with me one moment, guys. Okay. So I've typed in my password. And when I click login, it's going to unlock all those features that I was referring to. So if you have an iPad in your hands and you see the agent app and you tap it, you should see the login screen. You may not see the login screen, and there's a reason for that, and that is it's not enrolled properly, which again, I'm hoping I can get to at the end of the webinar. If anyone still has time for the Q&A period, I'll actually quickly go over the enrollment part. We send instructions on the enrollment part. I mean, I know you guys are super busy. You don't really, may not have had the time to actually read that. So, it's fine. If you guys have the extra time to stick around, I'd be more than willing to show you the enrollment part. But basically, the enrollment part is you wipe an iPad, and then at some point during the setup, it asks you to type in a username and password. And when that username and password field comes up, you basically type in your school's 4-digit Trillium number. So if my school is Sir Robert L. Borden, for example, their site code or Trillium number is 1234. So I would type in 1234 as the username and 1234 as the password, and then that would be the proper enrollment, and then everything should behave correctly like what you're seeing here on my iPad. But moving along, now that I've signed into the iPad, this is the screen that I see. This lets me know that I've signed in properly. I do see a logout button down here, and I would actually press that logout button when I'm done doing what I need to do on this iPad as a teacher. Because basically by logging in now, I have full access to it. I can do whatever I want to it. It's no different than how it was before. And if I were to give it back to a student, I would log out and hand it back to the student so that they can have it, and I don't have to worry about them putting passcodes on the device. So I've logged in. I can press the home button now, and I still don't see the App Store. I guess this is a good time to tell you that AirWatch is very network intensive. So if I do an action from AirWatch, sometimes it does take a little bit of time for it to propagate over to the device. Let's see if the setting's unlocked. Not quite yet. So it always happens when we're live. Okay, so I'm logged in. What I'm supposed to see happen is the AirWatch agent is supposed to appear here, but I don't see that. Let me just make sure something here. Hang on a sec. I have my 1, 2, 3. Well, that's not good. Thankfully, I have a backup iPad. Give me 1 second, everybody. I'm just going to disconnect this one here. You know what I think happened? I actually recently updated that particular iPad to the latest version, and the agent app on it may not have been updated to correspond with the latest update. So if I see it switch over, I'll let you guys know. So this is another iPad that I've pulled up on the screen. I'm going to do the same thing that I did before. This one is one less version, so it's 10.3.1, whereas the other one was 10.3. So I'm going to do the same procedure I did before, and I'm hoping this one will behave properly. Hopefully it'll actually... Oh, of course, as I'm talking, the other iPad does what I want it to do. All right, bear with me. I'm going to switch back. Blah, 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 blah. I'm going to disconnect this guy. Okay, I'm going to pull up my other one. Sorry about that, everyone. This always happens live. Like I said, with AirWatch, things are all very reliant on the network, so I could do an operation. It may take a little bit to show, but I just want to show you the agent app. I'm still signed in. I still see that logout button. This is iPad 1, 2, 3, and I've pressed the home button now, and I can see on this page my app store is available, and I can go into settings, and now I can apply whatever settings I want to it. There's no more restrictions. So, for example, earlier we were talking about the passcode. I can now put a passcode on the device. I'm not sure why you'd want to do that, but the option is there. If you guys want to put passcodes on your devices, you can sign into the agent and put a passcode on the device. Also, the the wallpaper. Now I have the ability to change the wallpaper. So, that feature wasn't available before when I logged out. Basically, this is no different than if you bought an iPad from the store. You have as much access to do whatever you want to this iPad once you sign into the agent app. There's no restrictions on it. You can sign into iCloud. You can sign in with an Apple ID. It's basically fully unlocked. And then, of course, once I'm done, and let's say I want to hand this back to a student, I just need to sign out. So I tap the agent app here, and then I click log out and hit yes. And hopefully this will be faster than when I logged in and had to unlock everything, but usually it's pretty fast. So I'm not sure why it's not cooperating today. So right now I logged out and I still see that the App Store is there. Again, very network reliant. It could just be that it's just sometimes just a matter of waiting. Oh, and of course, there you go. Sorry, let me go back here. So now I can see that the App Store is gone after logging out. So it's right back into student mode. And all my settings for the left-hand side have disappeared. I can't put a passcode on it. I think you guys get the idea. But that's the general purpose, the general principle of this check-in, check-out feature that we have available on the iPad. So you can launch the agent app, sign in, and you should have no restrictions on the iPad to do whatever it is that you want. Whereas if a student has it, they can't type in their student number and password into this app and unlock the iPad in the same way that you can as a staff member with your TDSB credentials. So that's the device side of things. And I'll go back, hopefully at the end, if you guys stick around and you want to see more on that, I'll go back to maybe covering a little bit of enrollment. So that was the agent and the catalog. Those are the two things I wanted to show you on the iPad side of things. And now we're going to talk about AirWatch Web Console. So first and foremost, logging in. So with AirWatch, it is on the cloud. It's not hosted here at the school board. It's hosted by AirWatch. We have a cloud server for them. And so that means it's available anywhere on the web. So as long as we have the link, we can click the link and sign in. So if you ever want to manage AirWatch at home, I'm not sure why you would, but you definitely have that option. There is no browser limitation, so you can use Internet Explorer, Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox. It doesn't matter. We've tested most of the browsers, and it doesn't seem to be too many problems as far as AirWatch goes. They're pretty good in that sense. An important thing to note here, though, is the username format. I'm not sure if you can see it because the little figure is kind of small. But in the username field is more importantly what I wanted to show. Basically, when you go to sign into the AirWatch console, and I will show this very shortly, is you type in your employee number and password. But before your employee number, you type in TDSB / / being the one directly above the enter key, not the one to the left of the shift key. So TDSB / and then your employee number. If you don't type in that TDSB / you're not going to be able to log in. And when you log in, it's actually going to ask you to create a 4-digit PIN code. That 4-digit PIN code is used for when you want to wipe a device. When you go to wipe a device, it tells you to enter in your 4-digit PIN code. And that's just sort of a last minute, are you sure you want to do this kind of thing? So you don't accidentally click wipe device and then lose sensitive data on the iPad. So it just makes you type in that PIN code as a confirmation to make sure you know that you're going to wipe that device. So when you guys sign in for the first time, it will prompt you to create your PIN code. If you ever forget your 4-digit PIN, there's no problem. You can change it from the AirWatch console at any time. So the link to AirWatch is right down here, and it's also in the video description. But basically, if you can remember this, https://cn239.awmdm.com. It is a mouthful. I understand. You can bookmark it. It's available, like I said, at the bottom of the video description. It's also, if you go to ServiceIT, our MDM site, the link is there as well. And with that, I'm going to switch over to the AirWatch console. Let me just exit out of this PowerPoint here. So I've actually already have it pulled up here. This is the AirWatch console. Again, cn239.awmdm.com. And of course, it's going to ask me for my username and password. And like I said, the important part when signing in is your username is not just your employee number like that, for example. You want to always put TDSB backslash. So let me just delete that out so you can see that. So TDSB backslash. The TDSB isn't case sensitive either. You can do TDSB lowercase. You can do TDSB and intercase. And it doesn't matter. As long as you have TDSB and then the backslash, you should be fine. Then you type in your employee number, and then you type in your current network password. So this is the same one you would use to access your email or log into a computer. And once you click login, you're not going to see this right away if you're logging in for the first time. What you're actually going to see is it's going to ask you to accept the terms of agreement. I actually have a screenshot of it just so like that. You can read it if you want, maybe a little bedtime story, but I would just click accept to proceed past the terms of agreement. And then that's when you'll be prompted to create your 4-digit PIN. Don't make it your PIN number for your bank. Just make it something that you can remember. The idea again here is just to make sure that you don't do anything accidental, such as wiping a device. It makes you type in that PIN code right before you do that option. So I've already set my PIN code. That's why when I logged in, it didn't ask me anything. It just basically took me right to here. So once you've accepted the terms of agreement and created your 4-digit PIN code, this is sort of the first screen that you see, and it's basically called the dashboard. The dashboard is a hierarchical overview of your environment, and it shows you everything based on statistics of your AirWatch environment. Just a bunch of lovely graphs, really not much here. I mean, there are some useful statistics, you could say. For example, last seen breakdown will tell me out of all my iPads that I have here, when was the last time that these devices came online and said hi to AirWatch. So last seen basically means, the iPad was talking to the network and it reported into AirWatch and told AirWatch everything about its current state. So in this case, I've seen that, I have 14 devices over here that have checked into AirWatch within the past 0 to 3 days. So that's something you probably want to see. But when you start looking at this figure down here where you have, greater than 31 iPads that haven't been seen, it hasn't been seen in greater than 31 days, you might want to investigate what's going on with those iPads. Why haven't they been online? Are they malfunctioning? Are they tucked away in a desk somewhere? Are they stolen? So AirWatch will sort of give you this statistical breakdown. And any of these graphics actually are interactive. I can hover my mouse over it and basically click on it, and it will then take me to the iPads that it's referencing. So for example, I'm just going to click these these greater than 31 days iPads here. If I click this little green bar, it's going to take me over to a list view of my devices, and then it's going to show me, what devices it's referring to. And how it does that is it basically just applied a filter for me on the left-hand side. It says, show me all the devices that have last been seen in 31 days. So now I can look at all these iPads and go, oh, these are the ones that it's referring to. And then I can look at, compare this with my physical inventory and say, hey, I don't know where CSD iPad 10 is. Maybe that's why it hasn't been seen in greater than 42 days. Maybe it's missing. I don't know. But that's the idea of the dashboard. Again, it's just statistics, so I'm going to close out of that. Switch back to the dashboard here. And I guess also, it shows you right here that I have 22 iPads, so that's good to know that, even just count-wise, it can show you that stuff. But all these graphics, you can go through them on yourself. Again, they're just graphs, and you can click them, and it'll tell you what these figures that it's referring to are. But where you'll probably spend some time here is now in the list view when you're first getting set up in AirWatch. So on the left-hand side over here, just under dashboard, is list view. And we actually briefly saw list view when I clicked that figure. It took me over to list view with the filter applied. But if we just go to list view au naturel, what we'll see is that it'll just show me a list of all my 22 devices that it was referring to. So this is where it sort of is pretty helpful in terms of inventory. I can now see all my iPads listed here. In this case, in my test environment, I actually also have some Android devices here that we're playing around with. So, and if you have some Galaxy tabs in your school, they're probably also in AirWatch as well. But for the most part, we're focusing on iPads today. But you will see a list of all your iPads in the list view, and it just kind of gives you, a brief overview of them. So, for example, what version of iOS is it running? 10.3.2. Oops, sorry. Click too fast. 10.3.2, and it even shows me the model. So this is an iPad 4th generation, for example, with 32 gigabytes of space on it. And you can scroll down and take a look at all the different devices that you have here. One thing I do want to show though is renaming the iPad while we're here. So the iPad that I have with me, no, since I have two, I'm not sure which one I was working with. This one. The iPad that I have with me, when I first enroll a device in an AirWatch, they all come in with a very, very generic name. It'll just say iPad, or in some cases, this one, for example, shows iPad and then a long cryptic string of characters. That's not going to be helpful for me when I'm looking at my iPads. When I'm managing my iPads later on down the road, which I'm going to show you later, is we're going to group them together. And then when I'm looking at a list of my iPads and each iPad is called iPad, I'm not going to know which one's which, especially if I have different purposes for my iPads. If I have a set of iPads that are for grade 1s and one for grade 2, with them all sharing the same name as just basically iPad, it's not going to be helpful for me. So what we do is we rename the iPads in AirWatch. You probably have your own way of labeling your iPads at your school. So maybe there's a sticker on the back that says number 1 to 20 or however many you have. This is what you would want to sort of match up with in your AirWatch environment. So for example, the iPad that I have in my hand, the one that I was connecting to earlier and the one that we were looking at, it basically, I would want to name it the way that I have the naming convention in my school. And the easiest way, I say easiest, but it's really not easy. The actual initial setup of AirWatch can be a little bit cumbersome, especially this renaming part, because this is where you first set up your AirWatch environment, and this is where you're doing the renaming. And once they're renamed, though, it's all good going forward. So just take my word for it there. But let's say I want to rename this iPad. How I would go about doing it, especially when I'm looking at a list of my iPads. I see, they all have a generic name, and I want to find out, which iPad is this one in this list. So this iPad, how I would go about doing that is I can always go to Settings, and then I can go to General over here on the left-hand side, and then I can go to About, and then there's a serial number value right here, about halfway down. It says here DMQ-K5G. So what I can do is switching back over here, if I know my serial number, I can use this search list box over here and start typing in my serial number. I can actually, like for example, only type in the first 3 characters, DMQ, and then hit enter, and it will filter out my list just based on those first 3 characters. So all of these iPads that it's produced back all have the first 3 characters of their serial number as DMQ. But obviously with, you want to narrow it down to just one iPad because I want to know which one am I working with. I believe actually the last 5 characters of the iPad are unique. So for example, the last 5 here are YRF183. So I can actually type in YRF183 and then hit enter. And that'll filter out my list for any iPad that has that in their serial number. And bingo, it's nailed it down to just one. So now I know that the iPad that I have in my hand that I want to rename is the one that I see here on the list. So now I'm ready to rename it. And how I can rename it is I click this little tiny pencil icon over here next to the iPad. And what it's going to do is it's going to bring up this Edit Device menu. And I'm going to give it a friendly name. So in the case of this iPad, let's say for the sake of scenario, this iPad is iPad number 2, and it belongs to the library. So I'd probably want to give it a name, something like library, iPad, and then number 2. So that way, when I'm looking at AirWatch and I'm looking at my iPad physically, the label on it matches up with my AirWatch environment. So that way it's easier to manage that way. And notice I put library iPad. So I kind of narrowed it down to a purpose, if that's how you guys do it at your schools. Every school might be different. Maybe you only have a certain subset of iPads that you use for just one grade. In that case, you probably don't need to put grade 5 iPad number 2. You could just put iPad number 2, or however it is that you label it. Again, it's totally up to you how you want to rename it. But you do want to give them each their own unique name so that when you come to manage them later, it's a lot easier. One little thing before I click Save after renaming it is that there's this checkbox here that says Set Friendly Name as Device Name. This checkbox here will push the name that I have set on this friendly name field over to the device. So once I click Save, what I'll see is in my AirWatch environment, that iPad that I have here, it's going to finish refreshing, and now it's Library iPad 2. And then what should have eventually happen is on my iPad, that name should now appear under Settings and under General and About. Again, probably if I go here, it might take some time. Oh, look, it actually got the name pretty quickly. So if I look at the name of the iPad on the iPad itself too, it actually matches up with what I just set there. So that's a little important detail to note. So, just makes it easier to have your name reflected in as many areas as possible. So I've renamed my iPad. Again, it is a little bit cumbersome. Let's say if you have, 60 iPads in here, there's that initial renaming part that can take some time. But like I said, once you have renamed them, it's going to be much easier going forward. And then say, for example, if I wipe this, there's no AirWatch icon on the iPad right now. Rebecca, if you can, just post the serial number for that iPad in the chat, and then I'll have to go back to that at the Q&A period. Some iPads have two things going on. Sorry, just so everyone, I don't know if you're reading the chat, but Rebecca said, we are following along and wipe the iPad clean using the instructions. There is no AirWatch icon on the iPad. Some iPads, I guess the important distinction to note is when you were going through that setup after wiping it, did at any point did it say the Toronto District School Board will automatically configure your iPad? Because that's the part that says that this iPad is automatically going to go into AirWatch. If it doesn't say that, and there was at no point did it ask you to type in a username and password, then that means that device is not in DEP. And DEP, you can find the serial number by going into Settings, over here, and then going to General on the left-hand side, and then About, and then if you scroll down, you'll see right here, serial number is halfway there. And Rebecca, when it asked you to type in the username and password, did you type in your school's 4-digit site code, or did you type in your employee number and password? And also, if it asked you to type in your, there's two Rebecca, sorry. Rebecca, I can't see the last name. The projector's a little bit far from me. But there's basically, there's two factors here. One is that maybe you typed in the wrong school username. It says here it says here you did. Okay, so then Rebecca, what I think it is probably just network related. So if you just give it some time, you'll see eventually if the background shows like the default background of like a, I think it looks like a leaf or something like that. I'm not sure. It's a scenic background. If you give it some time, that background will eventually go blue, and then the agent app will appear. If you see the catalog app on your iPad, you'll know that eventually that agent app is going to go. So just hold on to that iPad for now. Give it some time. What you can do is actually open up Safari on the iPad and just go to any random website. This will wake up the wireless card on it, and then that way it might force it to connect to the network. And just verify that it is connected to the network too. That's one thing that you can do. So getting back to here, so I've already renamed my iPad that I have here in my hand. So yeah, you see the catalog app. Yeah, so like I said, guys, just so as you can see, Rebecca had wiped a device and she was waiting for the agent app to appear as well as the catalog app. AirWatch is it's all related to the network. Everything it does is talking over the network. So I can do something in AirWatch and it might take a bit. Like when you saw that I went to check in and check out of the agent app, the App Store didn't disappear right away. Sometimes it's just a matter of waiting a few seconds, or in the case of wiping a device, and it could be even a few minutes just for those to come in. And what will probably happen later on the webinar when I show you deploying an app is I can probably deploy it and right away it doesn't go. There are some things you can do to help. One is that you just make sure that it's connected, and the second one being just wake up the wireless card. And how you wake up the wireless card is just opening up the browser and going to any random website.
Your voice is out.
My voice is out? Can everyone still hear me? It might just be your video. Who knows? I'm going to proceed as is. Anyways, sorry. So what I've done so far, just to recap, because I got a little sidetracked there, is we have a list of our devices. I filtered it down based on the last 5 numbers of the serial number here. And I then renamed that iPad that came up. So I've renamed my iPad, and now what I would recommend doing is I would do that for all the iPads that I have here, so that later on down the road, when I come back into AirWatch, it's much easier to manage. Thank you guys for letting me know. But also when we're on this list view screen is that we can actually shift our focus from a list of all of our iPads to just one particular iPad to manage. So for example, I already edited my library iPad number 2 iPad here, and now let's say I want to perform some other actions. I'm just going to show you details view. So right now I'm looking at a list view. I can shift my focus to just this one iPad and go into details view. And I'll show you why we do that. So if I click this library iPad 2, the one that I have here in my hand, is now I'm looking at, as opposed to a list, just this one particular iPad, and it shows me even more information. So for example, when was the device last seen, what day was it enrolled on, shows me, the serial number down here, shows me the power status. There's 41% of battery remaining, how much space is left on the iPad. I have 27 gigabytes available out of, 26 gigabytes available out of 27 gigs in total. Shows me if there's an update available for my iPad. And the reason I'm showing you this details view is just some actions that you can perform when you're working with individual iPads. So in the top right hand corner here, we see more actions. If I bring down more actions, this is where I can wipe a device on for an iPad. So I've clicked the iPad. I'm now in details view. I click more actions on the top right hand corner here. And now I can, let's say, if this iPad is wonky, it's not acting right, maybe it stopped responding to touch. There are, software bugs that happen. Sometimes you update your iPad to the latest version and something's just not right. I had to wipe 3 devices just the other day because they in settings would just freeze every time you opened it. And I just wanted to start anew. And the good thing is that when they're in AirWatch, I don't have to plug it into iTunes, put it into, recovery mode, where you press and hold the home button and the power button. I can actually just wipe it right from AirWatch. So for example, I would click device wipe, and this is that 4-digit PIN code that I was talking about earlier. Is now it's asking me to type in my 4-digit PIN code before I wipe the device, just so I don't do it on accident. So for example, I did it wrong intentionally because I don't want to wipe my iPad. But if I had typed in my PIN code correctly, almost right away the iPad starts wiping. Some other more actions under here. You can do an iOS update. If I did put a passcode on the device, but like I said earlier, by default there is no passcodes on the device. But say hypothetically you signed into the agent app and then you put a passcode on the device, you could then clear the passcode from here if you say forgot it. So Rebecca, you see the agent app? There you go. Perfect. See, that's sort of what I was talking about, is it just takes a little bit for some of these things to propagate downward. So if you do something and it didn't happen right away, I promise, give it some time, eventually it will happen. And that's really not the fault of, AirWatch. It's sort of like an Apple thing. It doesn't quite have like an active connection. It just kind of, you queue up commands, then it pushes it when it's ready, kind of thing. But I digress. So that you can clear the passcode over here under more actions. You can also do enable lost mode, and this is a cool little feature I like to show on the webinar. Let's say you have an iPad and it's unaccounted for. You haven't seen it in a few days. And what I can do is if I click enable lost mode, I can put a message on here instructing whoever picks up this iPad to return it to me. So I can say, I have lost this iPad. Please return to Mr. Silva. Silva's my last name. And I can put in a phone number, 647-123-4567, not my real number. And what I can do is I can click send. And now I haven't seen this iPad in a while. It's been unaccounted for, and I'd really like it back. I've now put it in lost mode, and let me show you. Funny enough, the application shows what happens. So basically, this iPad is unusable. I'm touching the screen. Nothing's happening. I can push the power button, but that's really about it. It just kind of triggers on and off. And if I restart the iPad, it's always going to do this. Basically, this iPad is now unusable. So if I did lose this iPad and, somebody picks it up, I would want them to see this message so that they know, okay, this iPad's unaccounted for. It says here to return to Mr. Silva, and he's got a number here. Perfect. Then, once I've retrieved my iPad, let's say somebody finally brought it back, I'm just going to show you under more actions, it'll still say enable lost mode. I need to refresh the page, because right now I enabled lost mode, but I need to disable it now. So now if I go back into more actions, that enable lost mode now says disable lost mode. I can disable the lost mode. Somebody has brought it back to me. That's great. And now I'm ready to have it put back into use. And if I go back to my iPad, it says right here, iPad located. And I can click this little continue down here, and my iPad is fully functioning again. So that sort of also takes away like the interest in somebody stealing it. If you steal it and I turn on lost mode, the iPad's unusable. And for example, let's say even if they went the extra step to wipe the device using some crafty measures, the second that device comes back to life and it joins any network connection, it goes right back into lost mode. So there's no value in stealing an iPad that has lost mode on it, and that's sort of like a security feature they built in. But that is lost mode. That's a neat little thing. You can play around with some of the more actions here. Find device is where you would track the location of the device. We have that turned off right now just for security reasons. We don't have that enabled. We don't want to have any concerns regarding privacy with that. Let's say if you sent an iPad home with a student, for example. So the location services is turned off, and it's not tracking any device locations. And that's fine. That's what we wanted. We think lost mode is a good compromise to that. So that's the most part of details view, just to show you those little extra actions that are there, the device wipe, the update, and the lost mode. We can go back into list view, and we can see all of our iPads again. So this was list view, where it just shows you a list of all your iPads. Click the pencil icon to rename them, and now we're ready to manage it. So now let's push an app over to this device, this library iPad number 2. You would think the obvious step would be to go to apps and books, but first we actually need to put this iPad in a group. So I'm just going to go to groups and settings over here, and then I'm going to click groups, and then I'm going to go down to assignment groups. So this is a quick little sidebar. We don't push apps directly to the iPads. How it works is we assign an app to a group, and then every iPad in that group gets the app. We have the AirWatch with username and password. What was that again? So the username and password is your employee number and password for the AirWatch agent. Find them all, wipe them clean, and reset. Yes, Rebecca, so that is part of the self-enrollment process. So I'm assuming most of you here have either had one of two ways how you ended up on this webinar. Is we either sent out a team of field services to your school because you guys have like 100 iPads, and they basically collected them all in one room, they wiped them for you, and they enrolled them for you, which is what obviously schools were preferring. However, field services, that does take a lot of time. So they may not have, we were trying to encourage users who had like maybe say 20 iPads to just do the self-enrollment, because really all it is you just wipe the iPad. That's all that's involved in enrollment, is you wipe the iPad. Once it comes back to life and you go through the setup, it asks you to type in a username and password. That's when you put in your school's 4-digit trillion number, and then they join your AirWatch environment. So that's the self-enrollment process. Obviously, when you have 100 iPads, it's a bit of a nightmare. So, we did send out field services to schools that are larger, or anyone who just really, wasn't interested in doing it. We always offered field services as an option. So getting back to the webinar here, the groups and settings. So like I said, we're assigning apps to the groups. So we create a smart group is what AirWatch calls it, and then we assign the app to the smart group. So say I had 20 iPads in one group, I could then put an app on the group, and then all 20 iPads get it, if that makes sense. And it'll make sense as I go along here. So just to go on with our example, I'm going to click Add Smart Group up here in the top, this big blue button. It's going to come up here, prompting me to create a new smart group. There are two options for creating a smart group: selecting by criteria and selecting the devices manually, basically, these two buttons here. By default, when you launch this screen, it goes to select criteria. We usually don't use this select criteria type of smart group, and the reason for that is it's a little bit confusing, but basically how it works is the select criteria applies based on parameters of the iPad. So for example, I could group my iPads based on, what version of Apple iOS do they have. I could say all Apple iOS devices 10.3.1. And then basically now if any iPad in my list that has 10.3.1 automatically joins this smart group, which isn't very ideal as far as trying to group them. So we just say avoid using select criteria altogether. In fact, forget I said anything. Anytime you open up this window, just right away click select devices or users. It may ask you, it says by switching you will lose all the selections you made. That's because I was clicking around down there. Just click OK. I don't care about losing any settings. I'm not keeping anything. So now we're going to choose devices manually, and how I do that is right here under devices. It says enter device friendly name. The second I put my cursor inside this text box field, a little drop down menu appears. And this drop down menu will appear with my list of iPads. Now this is why I said it's really important to rename your iPads. Because, when I was on list view, at least I had some other details here. Now when I'm adding them to a group, all I see is the name. So if I didn't rename them properly, you can imagine, for example, here's a good example. I have 2 iPads here that are named iPad. And one of these could be grade 1, the other one could be grade 2. I don't know which one's which. So if I had renamed it properly, I wouldn't be in this situation. But because I did, I named mine library iPad number 2. I can select that one, click add, and then it moves it over here. You can add, obviously, since we're grouping, we can add more than one to this group. I can, for example, here's another one called something else. I can click add. I can just keep tapping here, and this drop-down menu will keep appearing. And no matter how many times it appears, I can just select a new iPad, click add. Click the drop-down menu, find a new one, click add. And every one that it adds ends up over here on the right-hand side. Now, you can also remove iPads from the smart group. So even before I click save, let's say, oh wait, I don't want this one on here. I can click the checkbox and it takes it out. Yes, of course, Nisha, this webinar is recorded. You can watch the same link that you're looking at right now at any time. So if you want to come back and watch the rest later, by all means. So if you're leaving now, totally fine. I understand, very time consuming. Thank you for attending what we have so far. The name is the name of what we're going to call the smart group. So in the top right hand corner it says name. I can call this library iPads because I have my library iPad here. And then I click save. So what that's done is that's created a smart group called library iPad. I guess I should have called it iPads. Too late now. Anyways, library iPad. And I can see my smart group is right there. And over on the right hand side here, it even shows me, I can scroll and see how many devices are in there. For example, I can see that it was this one right here. There are 3 iPads in this group. So I have them grouped, all in this library iPad group. So now I'm ready to apply apps to this iPad. And how I do that is I switch over to apps and books. And under apps and books, by default, this is what I see. This list that I see down here, it's got a bunch of unknowns. I don't know what that's all about. But basically, when you come into apps and books, what we always do under the purchase tab, we're going to search for our school name. So I can type in test school. That's for the sake of my school. You can type in your school name or your school's trillion number. So you don't filter by app, you filter by the school name. So if I type in, Angry Birds, bad example, Google Drive maybe. Let's say I would search by the app name instead of the, thank you, Jennifer. Let's say I had to search by the app name. For example, I can see one I can work with here and the other one that I can't. So we don't search by the app name. Always, always, always search by your school name. Or you search by your school's trillion number. In this case, my test school is 9991. And what that does is it brings back a list of all the apps that apply to your particular school. And how these apps all got here is through the submission of the app request form. Anytime you want to see an app appear in AirWatch, you submit this app request form. And this app request form is available both in the video description and on the ServiceIT MDM website. Basically, any app that you can think of and you want pushed over to AirWatch so that you can manage it, you just submit this form, and within a few business days, you should see it appear in your AirWatch environment. So I've searched for my apps here. And again, all these apps got here just by submitting the app request form. They didn't appear here magically. You always have to submit the app request form. But eventually, they will appear here after submitting that app request form. And then now I can manage it. So say, for example, if I want to push an app over to my new library iPad group, what I would do, I'm going to work with CP24 Go. I'm going to click the app name right here. And I'm going to go down here to add assignment by. And I'm going to click license codes by smart group. And this is going to bring up this little box here where I can now choose my smart group that I want to apply it to. So if I click in here, I'll see a list of all my smart groups. In this case, I want to select library iPad. This is the one that I just created. And I can see it has 3 devices in there. And now what I need to do is I need to allocate a certain amount of licenses to the iPad. And how that works is, even though the app is free, we still give you free licenses, for example. So the CP24 app, for example, has 100 licenses. The app is free, but in the AirWatch environment, it's all working based off of licenses. So you have 100 free licenses of the CP24 Go app, for example. So I have 100 to work with, and I have 3 devices in my library iPad smart group. What you want to do is you want to set the allocated, because I need to give this group some of those licenses. I need to give it at least 3, because I have 3 devices in there. What I recommend, though, is you just give it a little bit more than you would normally do. So, for example, I have only 3 iPads, but I'm going to do 10. So, for example, down the road, let's say I get more iPads for my library. I can just add them to this group, and I don't have to worry about, hey, did I allocate the proper amount of licenses? Because if, let's say, you don't allocate the proper amount of licenses, some of the iPads won't get it, or it'll prompt you saying that, there's no licenses available. So always kind of shoot for the moon. We give you a bunch. We give you like 500, so you can do that. You can actually over-allocate. So now that I've added those 10 licenses here to my 3 devices in the library group, all I need to do is come down here, and I just want to show you something real quick, this assignment type. So I did mention earlier the presence of the catalog. With the auto assignment type, what that means is that it will automatically push out the app to the iPad as soon as it's the iPad's available and talking to AirWatch with the auto selection. But if I change that to on demand, that will put it in the catalog. And I'll show you what I mean. I'll deploy CP24 as on demand, which means it's going to put it in the catalog. It's not going to push it right away. And then I'm going to do another one as auto, and one will push it right away. So I'm going to click save here. And then I'm going to go find another app. Loading, come on. You may notice AirWatch sometimes just doesn't behave properly. And sometimes this happens too, where that spinning wheel never goes away. So you can usually refresh the page to get rid of that spinning wheel if you see it there and it doesn't go away. So I'm going to work with another app here. So I pushed that one as on the catalog. I chose the type as on demand. And I guess actually I can probably show you right now. So let me just switch over to the iPad here. And I push that app as on demand. So I go to my catalog. And what I see is that it's going to bring up a list of apps that I've set as on demand. So if I look down here, I changed to on demand, and if I go back to my iPad, I can see CP24 there. So that's the on demand basically means I'm installing it optionally. I didn't force it to the iPad, but if I tap install here, I give the user the option of installing it on their iPad. But you probably may not be using that as much. I mean, it all depends if you want to give apps optional to different iPads. Some people, what they like to do is they just will put all the apps as on demand, and basically they assign it to the iPads all group. So every school should have an iPads all group. If I hover my mouse over add assignment by, and let's say instead of just selecting the library iPad group that I created, every school should have an iPads all group. So say I want to apply something to all my iPads, you should see something similar to this. This one says test school -iPads all. This automatically contains all the iPads in your environment, and that should appear on your environment as well. This group should exist for everybody. So, for example, that's what some people like to do. They like to just put all their apps in the iPads all group and set it as on demand. Oops, sorry. On demand down here. And then basically give, the people the option on their iPad to do the install themselves if they want. But more likely what you're going to do is you're going to do the auto deployment. So, for example, I'm going to pick another app here. I'm going to choose Google Docs, and I'm choosing this intentionally because it has something I want to show you. When I click an app and I see this big blue button that says Enable Device Assignment, we always press that button. Every iPad app, when you first come in here to manage it, will probably have Enable Device Assignment button there. You press it once, and then you will never have to press it again. It basically, if you don't press that button, it will tell you that you need an Apple ID on your iPad. So if you ever see a big blue button here, always press the Enable Device Assignment. You do it once, and you'll never see it again. I'm going to cancel out of that because I just wanted to show you that. But let's say I want to force Google Drive. This is a pretty common one here. I want to put Google Drive on my library iPads. Same thing I did before. I hover my mouse over Add Assignment By. I click License Codes by Smart Group, and then I choose my Smart Group from this little box here. And I'm going to go to library iPad. Again, I have 3 devices in my library iPad group, but I have 100 licenses for Google Drive. So why not give this group 10? So that way, if I get more iPads for my library, I'm covered. And then I scroll down here. I'm going to leave the assignment type as auto. And again, auto means it's going to push it out to the iPad right away in theory. Now, again, I like to say it over and over again because with AirWatch, it is all very network related. For example, I click save. I mean, it hasn't really saved here yet, but it might not show on my iPad right away when I do auto. But generally speaking, if you wait, give it a few minutes, maybe. Sometimes it can take as long as even an hour. I've seen in some cases. In this case, I'm clicking save, and that's not even happening. There we go. Okay, so I've clicked save, which means that that app should appear on my iPad eventually. But if I switch back, I don't see it installing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to watch it in the corner of my eye, and as soon as I see it installing, I'll switch back. So that's how you push an app out to the smart groups. Yeah. I guess, yeah, thank you for that. So basically also another thing is that let's say I pushed, even though I've chosen that app as auto, which means it forces it to push out to the iPad, it's that even the automatic apps still appear in the catalog. So if I look in the catalog, I can see Google Drive is there. So I can still push that install button, and then it'll kind of like forces it to install. But the idea of AirWatch is that I want to be able to push out apps and not have any intervention on the iPads. I want to be able to push, let's say my library iPad group had 100 iPads in them. I don't want to go up to each one and force, I want to be able to push it out to all of them and not worry about it, right? And again, it just takes some time, more often than not. Like I said, I'm going to leave this iPad open, and I'm going to see it install eventually. And when I do, I will quickly switch back over. But that is how you deploy an app to your smart groups. So again, apps and books. Go to list view, and you're under the purchase tab. In the right-hand corner here, you type in either your school name. My school is called Test School. Or you can type in your school's four-digit trillium number, 9991. And then it's going to give you a list of all the apps that apply to your school. So these are the apps that you should have in your environment because you submitted the app request form. I hope that part makes sense because that's something that we get a lot about. That seems to be one of the more confusing parts about AirWatch is, you're looking here and you're wondering why. Sorry, I have to. Oh my God, everyone's got to go. I have missed this, but what is the group ID? Sorry, just wondering if we'll be able to answer questions. Students are returning momentarily. Guys, I'm really sorry about this. It's really hard to cram all this content in 1 hour. Okay, thank you. I'm going to continue talking, so you can always go back and watch the remainder of this. But thank you for attending. Again, I appreciate you guys coming out. But the group ID, I'm not sure what you're referring to, unfortunately. If you're talking about the trillium number, it's almost the same thing as I believe your cost center in SAP. I think it matches up. Teachers won't know. Yeah, I probably won't know that. The trillium number is the best way to do it. It's basically a 4-digit number. I'm not sure. I could always tell you what it was, but I unfortunately don't have that information with me right now. You can ask your OA. Your OA will know right away what the trillium number is of your school. So that's pushing out the apps to the iPads. I'm going to switch over to web clips. So web clips is sort of the exact same thing with creating an app. But the only difference is that I can create my web clip. So say, for example, I wanted to create a web clip for my iPads. I would click Apple iOS, click Continue here, and I would give a name for my web clip. So say, for example, I wanted to create a link to the, see, I already have my virtual library here. So let me just remove that so I can walk through this here. I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to run through this again. All right, so I click Add Application. For the platform, I'm going to choose Apple iOS. I'm going to click Continue. No worries. Thank you, Ashley, for coming out. And for the name, I'm going to call this the TDSB Virtual Library. And I'm going to give it the URL. So the URL is http://tdsb.on.ca/library. And I'm going to give it a little icon. So if I click here, I can give my web clip a little icon. In this case, I'm going to choose my virtual library icon here. And then I can assign it. Similarly, how I assign an app to an iPad, I can assign a web clip to an iPad. So if I click the Assign Groups here, I can find my library iPad group, and now I'm assigning my web clip to the iPad. Same options as an app as well. I have two options, auto and on demand. On demand puts it in the catalog, auto forces it to the iPad. I'm going to choose auto, and I'm going to click save and publish. And much alike the app that I pushed out, again, it's going to take some time. So you can see that I pushed out that app about 5 minutes ago, yet it still hasn't appeared here. Funny enough, though, the virtual library appeared a lot quicker. That's probably because the web clips aren't big, whereas with the app like Google Drive, it actually is a larger app. It's got a lot of space requirements on it, whereas the web clip is just a little, it's basically a shortcut. So the web clip made it right away. If I tap the virtual library now, what it does is it takes me to the link that I put in there, www.tsb.on.ca/library. And that's basically the idea of a web clip, and you can push that to all your iPads as well. And just really quick, so that was adding the web clip, and we added an app. I think I can show you now, we're coming near the end here, is how to remove it. If I go back to my purchase tab, let's say I want to remove an app. Now, I can't really remove something because I didn't really make it to the iPad yet. So I'll just go back into the web clip here actually. But let's say if I go back into this TDSB Virtual Library web clip that I created, the same way you add an app where you assign it to a group, you remove it by getting rid of the assignment. So for example, this one's assigned to the library iPad group. If I click this little X button here and click save and publish, if I remove the assignment, I remove the web clip. So here's my iPad right now, and what I should see eventually is that library should eventually disappear. Again, network permitting. It pushed so quick, but now it's not removing quickly. Come on. Oh, there it goes. Yeah, so you can see now that it's gone. So that's how you would remove a web clip as well as add a web clip. There's also the same, I showed you how to deploy the app. For example, we did Google Drive. Same thing applies if I want to remove an app from an iPad. I just click this blue X. So I remove the assignment of the app to the group, and it removes it from all those iPads. I'm not sure why the Google Drive app hasn't pushed yet. I think there's something going on, maybe with their network. But that's just it, really. You can go into each one of your apps and assign them accordingly. So let's say I want the Outlook app on here. I can click that and click that again. Find my group. Give it the licenses it needs. I'm going to give it all 10. Why not? And click save, and that'll push it out to the iPads. So like I said, more often than not, it's just that if you push an app out and you don't see it, it's just a matter of waiting. I still haven't seen the apps appear on my iPad, but it usually works. It's pretty good. If you go back on some of the previous webinars, you'll see it. Sometimes it happens right away. Sometimes it takes a little bit. So that was adding an app to your smart groups. And with that, I think that is pretty much it as far as the webinar goes. So I think the important parts that I want you to know is how to add an app and remove an app. But of course, if at any time you do have any questions, you can access our ServiceIT webpage for MDM, or AirWatch rather. It's basically serviceit.tsb.on.ca/MDM, and that has everything you need regarding AirWatch. All the documentation that we have there, it reflects basically what we covered here in the webinar and then more. And of course, if you have any questions regarding AirWatch or your iPads, you can always contact us at the help desk at 416-395-4357. We are option 5. With that, if you need to go now, I have well overstayed my welcome and took all your time. I apologize, guys. Like I said, there's a lot of content to cover in this, and a lot of questions that come up, so sometimes it runs a little bit longer than an hour. The good thing is that they are recorded, so if you want to pick up where you left off later, you can use the same link that you have here. But for those that stuck around, if you have any questions, now would be the time, and I will go into more detail if you have the time as well. So, Felipe, what do we have? Let's see.
Angela was saying that she doesn't see the iPads in her AirWatch, but I just got the serial number of one of them and it's listed there.
It's listed in their environment?
Yeah. She's in that street.
Okay, so I'm actually going to switch into one of my roles that has a little bit more privileges. Yes, so the iPad should connect to WLAN TDSB01 automatically. So say, for example, here's my iPad right now that's enrolled in AirWatch. If I go to settings and I look at the Wi-Fi, it shows here that it joins WLAN TDSB01. The reason it joins WLAN TDSP01 is because it has a certificate on it. If you were to take, for example, your personal device and try to join WLAN TDSP01, it would not let you do that because that one requires a certificate. So once the enrollment completes on your iPad, which you can tell, again, you'll know that the enrollment is complete by when you see the agent app on your iPad. If you see the agent app on the iPad like you see here, then you know that it's in AirWatch, and therefore if you see the agent app, you know therefore it has a certificate to join WLAN TDSP01. But after the initial setup, it's supposed to actually switch over, because during the actual setup of an iPad, the only wireless network you can join during the setup is TDSP Wi-Fi. So because it doesn't have the certificate at that very moment, you have to join TDSP Wi-Fi. And then once it's done, the enrollment part, then you have to switch over to WLAN TDSP01. It's supposed to switch over automatically. And in all scenarios that I've seen, it switches over automatically, no problem. I hope that makes sense. I'm going to wipe one of my iPads here in case you want to see the actual enrollment part, or if I need to go into more detail about that. I apparently have Wi-Fi issues in the building. Yeah, so there is a list of very unlucky schools that have not only Wi-Fi issues, but a poor connection as far as their network connection goes. You would probably know that because you've heard people screaming down the hallways about how slow the network is. In July this year, they're actually beginning the project of getting those schools that are on those slow networks migrated over to the high-speed network. Thankfully, finally we have a new contract with Bell Canada to upgrade those networks. So that will happen for the new year, unfortunately. So right now there's a lot of mitigations in place. You probably saw it on the news. We disabled Netflix, Snapchat, Instagram, and these are all. It wasn't because we're trying to be buzzkills or anything like that. It's because these are mitigations they want to take to improve network performance until the end of the year. But yeah, so like I said, and with that, with those slow network connections, things on AirWatch might take some time as well, even more so than what I was able to show you here. Like for example, I pushed out those apps to this iPad. I can see it's online and it's connected, but it still hasn't gotten those apps. So I mean, sometimes it's even just a matter of just waiting, even like overnight. So sometimes if they're all sitting in a cart somewhere, you can just deploy the app, and then usually by the next morning they make it over. I still don't know why it's not coming over to this iPad. Be interested to see if that eventually does make its way over. So did we get the serial number for that?
Yeah, so Angela was saying that...
Annette Street, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to go over to schools. So I have the ability on my end to sort of go into every school's environment. So what you're seeing here, you're probably not going to see on your end. But I'm going to take a look at Annette.
So it is found there, but what she's saying is that the App Store stays in the...
Yeah, of course. Angela, I will send you an email directly, and then we can talk about it. I do see you have 48 iPads in there. So it's not like your AirWatch environment is empty. It's just one particular iPad?
So it's 3 of them she's mentioning.
3 of them aren't appearing?
So no, it's not that they're not appearing. It's that the App Store stays on the iPad.
The App Store stays.
And the students are able to change the background and stuff.
Oh, really? The App Store stays on the iPad. The check-in, check-out's not enabled? That's very interesting. Okay, Angela, I'll send you an email directly and we can follow up regarding that. Actually, good timing. Okay, so finally, I don't know if you're still around or if anyone's even still interested, but Google Drive is installing. So, T-minus 10 minutes later, it's now finally pushed its way over to the iPad. So, again, that's actually a pretty good real-world scenario of how long it takes for some apps to push you over. CP24 is supposed to push you over too, but even that one still hasn't showed up yet. So the wireless is kind of flaky in this room too. So that's, again, you might see something like that occur for you when you go to push your apps. They don't appear like right away magically, but if you give it enough time, eventually they do get the app. I promise you that. So Is there any other questions while I all still got you here? Something you would like me to expand upon? Something you want me to shed some more light on? I'd be happy to go into more detail with that. But of course, if you do have to go, we'll say that the webinar has ended about 20 minutes ago. So feel free to go if you got to go. And thank you very much for attending. I really appreciate it. And if you have any feedback regarding it, you can always let us know. We do appreciate the feedback. Oh, look at that. CP24 Go's going now, too. See? I told you. I'm not a liar. But if you have any feedback you'd like to let us know about the webinar, something you would like to see in the webinar, maybe hey, you spent too much time on this or you didn't spend enough time on that, please let us know. Be as harsh as you want. We do appreciate the feedback and it helps us out. And we're hoping maybe to continue some webinars, who knows, just in the future, other initiatives that come out. Yeah, that's Outlook. Oh, it's still not CB24. Oh, great. Okay. Well, at least they're making their way over. So I'm just going to let you guys mull over for a few more seconds if you have any other questions. Just don't want to disconnect while if anyone has any questions or maybe they want to go in more detail. I'll give you guys a few seconds. If you got to go, thank you very much. You can go. Okay, you don't have anything in the web app section. So you're referring to, if you go to apps and books here, and then you go into the, oh sorry, hold on, I gotta switch my roles. I'm still looking at a net public school. Let me switch over here. So the web app section, if you go to apps and books, and then we look at the web tab, these are here because I created them. So we don't populate these. Like for example here, I'll delete my library. And someone else created Lego Mindstorms. I don't want to remove it just in case they're testing something with that particular app. But the web clips, you create them. So we didn't put them there. So here's one that I see happen a lot is
AirWatch is not set up for them.
AirWatch is not set up for them.
Erin at Lindy, that's why she doesn't have web apps.
Oh, what?
So, the apps?
I think. Well, I'm trying. Sorry, just to clarify, because now we're a little bit confused. The web app section. Are you referring to the web tab, or are you referring to? Are you looking under the purchased tab here, where we see all of our apps, and then you search for your school, like in my case 9991, and now you don't see any apps? Is that what you're saying? Because if you don't see any apps, like I said, these apps. Well, I switched. Now I don't know where I am. The apps get here through the submission of the. Oh yeah, the web tab. Okay, yeah. So I was on the right track. Okay. Felipe trying to throw me off. So the web tab, again, you create these. So there's nothing there by default. These are like Lego Mindstorms. Somebody created that. So this is something that you guys may want to do. So sometimes what schools do, particularly kindergarten, they like Pebble Go. So let's see. I think it was a TDSB. CA Pebble Go. I'm just gonna Google search this and see if I can get the link, because there is a particular link. So let me just show you really quick. So let's say I wanted to create a web clip for Pebble Go. Well, first I gotta find it. Where is it? Read. Somewhere here. Quick finds. Here we go. So say for example, I want to create a Pebble Go link on all my iPads. First off, I like that icon. I'm going to start by taking that icon. I'm going to right-click Pebble Go, and I'm going to save the image, and I'm going to put that image on my desktop. So now I have this Pebble Go icon image here. Looks good. Now I want the link.
What she's saying is that when she's logged into the agents, the apps appear.
When I'm logged into the agent, I have the apps on the iPad. But then when I log out, they disappeared. What? Are you? What apps disappear?
No.
So when you log into the agent, the only thing that should be disappearing as far as apps, I mean, there's a few that disappear. I know the App Store disappears. Depending on, I mean, they may have changed a certain configuration per different people's environments. So when you log into the agent, though the virtual library link and the AW link disappear, that's strange. That shouldn't happen. Yeah, the idea is that when you log into the agent app, it's supposed to unlock the app store, and when you log out, it 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 gets rid of it. But it shouldn't touch your web clips. They appear. I don't know. You get another page of apps. That's bizarre. I would love to see that. Sorry, what school? What school is that? Lingate? Oh, okay. Tell you what, I'll send you an email directly, and we'll have to take a look at this. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take one of my iPads and I'm gonna enroll it in your environment. So I'm gonna take one of my iPads, I'm gonna wipe it, and then when it asks me for that username and password, I'm gonna put in Lingate's number, and basically it'll take my iPad and put it in your environment. So I should see everything that on your iPad that you see on one of my test iPads, and if I can reproduce that behavior, then hey, that'd be great, because you know that's me. There's something wrong. In which case, I'll definitely have that ticket escalated. So keep an eye on your email. You'll see one from me. My name is Brandon. I'll email you directly regarding that particular issue and see if I can reproduce that on my end here, and we'll take a look at that. So aside from all these quirky little bugs that are coming up, is there any other questions? Okay, so I guess I'll just call her a day. Thank you very much for all those that reported some issues. We're going to be following up with you directly very shortly. All those that attended and all those that may still be watching, thank you very much for attending the AirWatch webinar. We do this every other Thursday, so if you didn't catch it this time, you can catch it the next time. And of course, the webinar is recorded. You can use the same link you're looking at right now to go back and watch anything you missed, or to refresh yourself on something that you didn't quite understand the first time you watched it. So thank you very much for attending the webinar, and I hope you all have a very, very swell day. Take care, and feel free to call us at the client service desk if you have any difficulties. Ciao.